I love to look at ways to apply things from one field into the next. We have to have market fit, we have to have the method dialed in, and we have to have a model that sticks if you want to be able to scale. The hard times really do lead to breakthroughs and gratitude on the other side. It is important to be experiencing joy and connection every day. That is part of our human experience. It is exciting to challenge ourselves to get our great work and our methods into the hands of more people.
Hello and welcome to the Success Differently podcast. My name is Michelle and I'm your host. And today I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Pamela Slim. Pam is an award-winning author, speaker, and founder of the Pamela Slim Agency. She is a certification expert who helps services businesses scale their impact and income through the design of their intellectual property. Super interesting. With over 30 years of experience in both instruction and training, Pam and her team build certification and licensing programs that help to create more momentum and more sustainable growth. Her journey spans over 30 years and consulting with Fortune 500 companies like HP and Cisco, right to launching her own very successful blog called Escape from Cubicle Nation, which ultimately became her first book in 2010. Now, she is the author of 3 acclaimed books, including The Widest Net, which Porchlight Books named the best business book in 2021 in the sales and marketing category. And this conversation is for anyone who is ready to build their business that's rooted in purpose, community, and real-world impact. I am super, super excited. So Pamela, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, this is a real treat. So around productizing and scaling businesses, particularly around services, it gets really tricky. So I'm really looking forward to where this goes. But first, let's go back, way back. You've been doing this for over 30 years, and I'm curious about what drew you into this work in the first place. Where did it all start?
What's so interesting is my degree in college was community development and very specifically looking at non-formal education as a tool for social and economic change in Latin America. So it's one of these mouthful degrees. Yeah. I studied in Mexico and Colombia and in Bogota, and was always really fascinated looking at systems models of how it is that communities, especially from grassroots efforts, are really creating and strengthening their economies and having better social outcomes and financial outcomes. So that was my early joy. I loved my college experience. It was so interesting getting to live in different countries and see different models. I think after I had my feet on the ground in different places, and I realized as this fresh-faced 20-year-old white woman from the US that I probably wasn't the best expert to be telling, for example, people from Colombia how they should be structuring their economy and their programs, because just philosophically, it felt like I really wanted to be of support from what they were doing, but that model really didn't feel like it fit. So I kind of stumbled backwards into the field of training and development by coming back home. At that point, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I worked in an art and science museum, the Exploratorium, which is a really cool place. And then I worked for a software training company. And then when I finally landed at a financial services company, Barclays Global Investors, I think now BlackRock owns them as they own most everything these days. But I felt like I had discovered a magic universe. I was so interested in seeing how organizational development, training and development did contain some of those roots of systems thinking and community development, but it really was anchored in personal, professional transformation through learning. And so it just began a love affair that has continued all this time, that is, I've seen and experienced in many different ways. But I never tire of defining learning objectives and thinking about behavioral outcomes. It just still lights my fire after so many years.
That is fantastic. I'm having a little giggle because as you talked about your journey in financial services, which was sort of the catalyst that created some clarity around where you are now. I also had 10 years in financial services, and that's what launched me to where I am now as well. And that was 21 years ago now when I became a coach. So it's funny how financial services, I cannot get over actually how many people we talk to where some version of financial services has been in their story in the past.
I
It's
know.
remarkable.
It was the greatest experience. And I feel like I was extra lucky because I had the best direct manager and then VP who were just, it felt like I got a master's just by learning about the way that they approached business. But, when you understand financial services, it is the lifeblood of people's individual lives. It's the lifeblood of businesses. So it is really a really wonderful foundation. Yeah, I really appreciate the years that I spent in that role.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. So, systems and community development is sort of at the heart of everything.
Hmm.
So, what happened? I'm just curious. I'm curious about financial services specifically because that was the last part of your journey. So, art and
Yeah,
science, software, then financial services. You're kind of touching the creativity, the technology, and the money.
that's right.
So, tell us more about that. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
it is. I personally, the way I've always approached my work is very thankfully, some people have understandable existential angst about what they're doing and if
Mm,
they're in the right career. I have always had a sense that I follow my interest and I really love to learn and I love to look at ways to apply things from one field into the next. And so some of it is just as opportunities come up, I see interesting ways in which I can look at that work. But a lot of it is being more of a systems thinker. I am really interested in different ways in which the overriding theme is probably ways that people transform, where they go from a
mm,
position of feeling stuck, overwhelmed, dissatisfied, whether in their individual lives or from an organizational perspective, and then really figuring out what are ways in which you can help them to make some kind of a transformation to a better place. And so, getting experience in a number of different contexts, the first 10 years of my business, when I was a management consultant, that was another case where I was working with primarily tech companies at first. So, in Silicon Valley, building programs for them, things like management development programs for their employees or
mm.
doing team growth, scaling activities. But also, then I just through the years, got to see the inside of every kind of business you can imagine, insurance businesses and financial
Mhm.
services, very creative, design oriented places. The thing that was cool about that is no matter the type of industry that it was, there were certain essential truths. I used to joke that you put more than one person together and you have a dysfunctional organization. So I had an unlimited market for
It's
helping
always
people,
about the relationships, right?
right? And for helping people work on the human side of business.
Yeah.
And I think that is the area where I've always leaned. I do care and I've learned a lot about the technical parts of business and how to architect and business models and all of that. And I am always really interested in looking at that thread of how it is that humans are behaving, because
Mm,
especially where we look at the purpose of any business, I know you talk to a lot of service based businesses. We are overwhelmingly selling things that can make people's lives better. So they can
mhm.
reduce risk or they can save time or they can make more money. It makes perfect logical sense that people should be purchasing our services. However, the way they make that decision is really based a lot in human behavior, and it's based on communication. It's based on the way that you're sharing your market fit, the promise that you have, in what it is that you're selling. It doesn't matter if it's the greatest thing that has ever been invented that will solve everybody's problems. If you can't make the case in a way that connects with them, they
Right.
will invest elsewhere. And probably all of us have had that experience where you're saying, I can't believe that person I talked to went and invested with somebody else's business when you might know that your method or your process is better. And it often is because we're not
Mm,
really connecting with that human being and understanding exactly how to talk to them in a way that opens the promise of helping them to get
mhm,
their outcome.
exactly. So as you're thinking, what I'm hearing, um, you started off with community development at the beginning of the conversation, and I'm wondering where that, because it's around, you've talked about behavior, and your interest obviously lies in that human relationship, human behavior, what motivates people. That's the sense I'm getting. Am I capturing that accurately?
It is. It is a part of core threads that go
Yeah.
through work that I do in general, as we talk about the specifics, tend to be more of a systems-based work.
Yeah.
For example, when I'm working with people to do what I do now, to scale their business through intellectual property, the elements we need to work on are the business model itself. What are the products and services that are scalable? We have to work in team development. How do they hire the best people, motivate them? How do they work with things like AI in their business to have the more streamlined opportunities? And then how do you sell into large companies? Share your thought leadership. So the people who I'm working with, the nature of the projects themselves have different components that need to be integrated. I think that's for me as a strategist, where I need to understand those different pieces.
Yeah.
But, we all know people who might be an absolute expert in pricing. So like they're the person you want to go to that just have this very specific depth. For me, as more of a strategist, I need to understand how the pieces fit together. And again, if I have to lean one way or the other, I tend to lean more toward the human side of business, marketing, communications, those kinds of things.
Right. So when you talk about learning and taking a systems approach to learning, I think, that's what I'm hearing as a thread for you. And I'm also curious about where did this, what informed your style? Like if you go, you know what I mean? If you go back into your story and you think about what is it about the systems and the learning that have come together to inform how you do your work today? Was it always there, or was there something more?
Yeah, I think some of the earliest roots were about being an exchange student in high school. I was an exchange student to Switzerland in high school, which was the example of an experience. I grew up in the same house in the same town my whole life in San Anselmo, California, in the Bay Area. And so when I went to a different place like Switzerland, I met people from all over the world. I like experienced things in a whole new way. And I feel like it unlocked a different way of looking at things that to me are like that got me down that path of being interested in the rest of the world and, change. I come from a family of a lot of community building. My dad was a photojournalist by trade, but he also was created the first curbside recycling program in 1971 in the state of California. He was always working on community initiatives.
Nice.
So early on, I think there was just a springboard into looking at the bigger picture of the world and then being excited about making positive change. What has informed, it's a great question, looking at the specific approach that I have as I think about a nuanced approach to scaling through IP, right? For service businesses, we have what we call in the agency your thumbprint, which is made of three components. There's market fit. Will it sell? Do you position things in a way that people understand and they're willing to take out their credit card or credit purchase order for? There is method. Will it work? Does what you're promising actually deliver consistent results in the fewest possible steps in a consistent way? And then there's model. Will it stick? Are you designing it, creating the visualization, creating the language around it such that it's easy for people to be remembering to reinforce the behavior that they're learning in the method, and that makes it easily referable to other people? And so a lot of that approach, which is what I feel very strongly as a 20-year business coach, which is what I've done before starting the agency, like those are the things that need to be dialed in order for somebody to have things that work. We've probably all we've had the experience of being excited and delighted by somebody's market fit promise. We've read the sales letter, we've heard the sales pitch where we thought they have the answer to all my problems. We invest, and then we find through our experience through the method that there is no there, or that maybe there's missing gaps, or sometimes you have the being courted like the, preferred date in the first part of the sales process. And then as soon as you give money across, then all of a sudden everybody will disappear and you don't have a good experience. Conversely, we probably also know people who are probably the world's best expert in something. What they do is so wonderful, but for the life of them, they can't figure out that market fit component. Or for some of us who are systems thinkers, it's a blessing and a curse Sometimes we just want that pithy one liner where we say, this is the one thing that I do, and have a quick answer that everybody can, can purchase. It's part of that sticky kind of model thing, right? That we need. So all of those components are informed by my early stage, systems thinking work, by my work on the ground, working in community, doing influence, talking through difficult, conversations. 20 years directly working with business owners to actually bring ideas to life and bring them to market, doing it myself, doing thought leadership, getting that, writing books, having the market fit, training and development. A lot of the models of training and development are such a beautiful fit to help people who care about delivering great results to really know exactly how to design things so that they can get good outcomes. And people who are functional experts, let's say you're great at finance or insurance, you're not necessarily an instructional designer by trade. Right. But when you learn something about how it works, there's a book. It's really funny. I went to a mastermind of a good friend of mine, Mo Bunnell, and I read a book decades ago called Analyzing Performance Problems. And it is a book that has a whole series of flow charts where you see if somebody is not performing a certain way, then it's Robert Mager is the author. So somebody is not performing. So either they're not doing their task or they're not, investing in something they should be. You go through this whole series of, if-then scenarios within a flow chart to actually get to the root of why it is that they're not doing something. This was written probably 50 years ago, but I mentioned it in the group, and it was really funny because all of a sudden everybody started buying this book because for me, it's an example of a resource that makes as much sense for analyzing like business problems as it does traditionally in designing training programs. So it's like everything over time, the experience, having analytical models, having practice, and then really forming models for me, like something like Thumbprint, is where the light bulb really went off. We can't just work on one piece of that. We have to have market fit. We have to have the method dialed in, and we have to have a model that sticks if you want to be able to scale.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned Switzerland, and I think I'm thinking about my own experience internationally. And when you talked about Switzerland, I thought Switzerland is known to have really good systems.
Oh my goodness. I ironed dish towels when I was there. I was staying with a host family and I wrote home because at that point we didn't have any social media or, hardly email.
Yeah, no.
Yes. The Swiss are known for having just precision and systems. And again, those experiences were really amazing.
Exactly. Well, I can see you. I can see you just lighting up, right? As you're talking about it, there's such a deep, I can see and feel and sense your deep respect for systems. I can just see it, right?
Yes. Exactly. And then there's the chaos. I was just telling my kids a story the other day. I think they think I'm Forrest Gump sometimes because I was like, well, when I was 20 on the border of Venezuela and Colombia, like landing by myself in 1988, which was in the midst of all of the drug trafficking. Like I had no idea that I was
an adventure spirit.
Quite dangerous. Right. So being in very dangerous, chaotic, risk-filled situations also is a big part of what I've learned. We look at today, in this moment right now, we're in this global part of our history where there's so much uncertainty and fear and risk and doubt. And so leaning on some of those earlier experiences, help to keep me even keeled to know
for sure
what we can kind of keep doing in order to, to move forward, hopefully through this time to more solid ground is my hope.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. Gorgeous moment there, taking you from Switzerland into the chaos of Venezuela and Colombia.
Yeah.
And the extent of your experience in both of those, I would imagine are almost polar opposites in the sense of systematic, orderly, and order and risk, right?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Like they're definitely, culturally, especially the Colombian people. I love Colombia so much. And there is like huge relational connection, warmth, empathy, very strong social systems. at that point in 1988, they had been living through so much political chaos and violence and particular drug trafficking that, yes, it was much more dangerous. But there was an order and a structure. It was different than, what I had in a quite sanitized Switzerland in 1984, where it was a very safe place to be. The trains all run on time and all of that. There always is an order in different ways. Like I was amazed at the resilience of the Colombian people, in those cases. But yeah, it was, and thank God for being young, and thank God I survived, because I do look now as being a parent and looking at some of the situations that I put myself in, not really realizing the risk.
Yeah.
I don't think I would want my own kids in that situation today.
It's too funny. My experience thinking back on those days, I spent 2 years in Japan, which heavily influenced me in my work as well, in a totally different way, of course, because the orientation that I bring to my business, I guess. But noticing how that those different experiences actually influence and in some ways amplify what's important to us because of our natural lens. So your business has somewhat changed. You're a 3-time author. You've been scaling and training businesses through systems for a long time. And more recently, it's about the Pamela Slim agency is really specializing in certification, licensing, and productizing. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So what's shifted in your work that's lit you up now to be doing what you're doing? What caused the change a couple of years ago?
It really is just a progression of maturity of audiences. So I think it is about working with people up to a certain stage. I work with a lot of thought leaders that have really powerful bodies of work. Naturally, they will first do things like codifying in books. When books do well, you tend to develop workshops or programs. When you deliver that, you can be on a lot of planes or, in Zoom a lot doing direct delivery. So the next step is often to have a certification or licensing option. And I found that as I was trying to coach people through how to do it, it really just made more sense to be doing that work hands-on as opposed to just coaching people through it. Yeah. So it kind of went back to all of the experience I had the first 10 years of my business, knowing how to build programs for large companies, because that's what I did as an outside provider. And I just found that there was actually, it was a kind of a unique spot in the market, because I really do understand the individual thought leader path, having done it myself, and really understand how to sell B2B. So it's just been a really wonderful way to meet a market in a unique way. And just, I love being a coach. I have been for years. It is fun to build real things as well, not only get some feedback, but also build things.
What lights you up in this work? When do your eyes get that big sparkle in them?
To me, it's really about when I see an idea brought to life and then really see the impact of what it is. So, I can tell literally hundreds of examples. Work we did last year with an amazing thought leader that has a super powerful body of work and, was navigating challenging growth situation where she had to really position what it was that she was doing in order to grow her work and they had investment from an outside firm. So, we're just doing a lot of strategy work to help her articulate what she wanted to do and to get the resources she needed. So that was last year. This year, she got everything she wanted and needed. This year, she's tripled her revenue. Now we're at that next stage of growth of really scaling the business. And it feels so magical and privileged to be able to be in those conversations where we're building that first phase of of the process, and then seeing our clients actually deliver it and get the results. I've had that for books. One of the case studies that I have featured in my website is my amazing longtime client, Dr. Romy, who is a neurologist. And I had a learning lab, a community space in downtown Mesa, Arizona, where I lived for about 8 years. There was a huge, beautiful whiteboard wall. And she created her whole vision on the wall of wanting to write a book and have a whole business and have her work be impacting people all over the world besides just being a physician. And all of it actually came to be. She got a book deal. Her book was on the USA Today list. Now she's a chief wellness officer. She serves thousands of people. Her research has been, I think, taken like a survey that she has, and her research is, over 25,000 people. So that to me is just magic. Like, how can we go from a twinkle in the eye of what somebody wants to do to actually see it realized? That's the world that I love. I'm definitely a concrete builder, where I know as a coach or advisor, it's my client's job to take the steps in order to get it done. But if I can help them start from the best possible position with a great program or a great platform or great products and services, and then they smash it in terms of like selling it and bringing it to life, it's incredible. It's very rewarding.
Right. Yeah.
Love what I do.
Oh yeah, we can see that. It's obvious. What I'm thinking about is, you mentioned the twinkle in the eye, which is an expression I use a lot. So, you said when they have that twinkle in the eye, we can turn that into something tangible, these beautiful results and whatnot. I'm actually curious because in the work that I do, typically the twinkle is missing. So when someone is working with me around clarifying their differentiation, better understanding what is their true value in the market, how do they create that unique value that they somehow know is in there but haven't yet been able to express or develop, a lot of the time, as I said, the twinkle is missing and they're feeling stuck. And they don't really know how to elevate what they're doing in a way that's not only going to be more money, but also more meaning. There's a ton of resistance in my experience. I see that a lot. There's quite a lot of resistance around saying, bringing forward more of that, essentially the twinkle. I like to say I polish the sparkle. So when we're doing that polishing, if you will, there's a part that's saying, no, I can't be that way, or I've always done it this way, or there's a bit of resistance to sort of bring more of that authentic self forward. Where do you see that in your work with clients?
I generally see it as my clients are navigating different ways in which they can grow and scale their business, or maybe opportunities that they have where they're trying to decide, what should I do? Either how can I get more business, or how might I leverage the business that I have to grow in a new way? That often where the resistance can come is where they might think that they should be doing things. We all get input as we should from smart people who have done things, and we can learn. But there can also be a certain view that, smart people, good service businesses, do this. And if you don't do that, then maybe there's something wrong with you. And so whenever I hear resistance, I always just think fear. So to me, it's just digging into what exactly is the fear. And it can be everything from, is this actually going to work? Which is the question we should always be asking and solving for, and building out a way to, make sure that we're mitigating risk. But also it can be like, is this actually what I want? I just did a session with some business owners. And that was a lot of what the conversation was. Yeah, there's actually potential to do a lot more to make more money, but is that actually aligned with where they are right now, personally and professionally? And is it more about really just strengthening and fully bringing to bloom all the powerful things that exist before being ready to explore the new areas? So it comes up all the time. And, I think the other components of that can be where other things have happened on the personal side. We're complete humans, and people can be going through a whole variety of things, either, having grief, difficult situations. They can be like me, getting ready to be an open nester where, all of a sudden after 20 years, there's going to be no more kids at home, and dealing with the identity shift that sometimes can put into question everything you're doing on the work side. So it shows up a lot. And it's like the next book I'm working on is called Remember Who You Are. And a lot of it is ways that we can connect ourselves to actually what we want, to be addressing the things, honestly, that we're afraid of, to be designing things that are really the perfect fit. for what we want. Because if anything that I've seen over 30 years is that there are many, many, many ways that you can bring good work to the world, that you can do work, and that you can structure your business.
Absolutely.
There's not one model. And that's where I think a lot of people go into shame spirals and comparison. And what do they say? Comparison is the thief of joy. I really believe it to be true.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. It's very true. And interesting to your point. I agree. There's no limit to how you can design your business now. There may have been at one time, there are more limitations simply because of cultural influences, societal expectations, and also even technology and globalization, et cetera. So there's a lot more then. But today, there is so much opportunity now for people to design in their own vision, on their own terms. I love the name of your book, Remembering Who You Are. Remembering who you are. It's such an important part, where I think, in my experience, I see that people, especially earlier in their career, they start to lose themselves because they're being trained, right? They're being trained in their craft. So they're learning to adapt their behaviors, to adopt new habits. And they're having to, in some ways, sort of learn how it's done. And then what happens is they get stuck in that way, and they forget, or they don't realize that okay, now you know how to do it. So you can actually toss the rules out and do it your way now, right? It's like learning how to write. I always equate it to learning how to write when we're in school. In my day, we were learning cursive. So of course we had the double lines, and we had to write the little A, and then it had the line, and it had everything in there that taught us everything had to be the same size and the whole bit. And of course, today, most of us are writing scribbles, and it's just fine, right? We have our own style, and you can identify your own handwriting. But when you first start, you can't, because you're just learning. So
it's really true. And it's really fun just working on the model and the ideas, because I've had the gift of working with people from all kinds of different backgrounds, age, experience, gender, racial background, cultural background. And it is so multidimensional. People can be nourished in their business and in their leadership in many different ways. And I find it really is that this book feels like it is the reflection of what an important part of what I've done as a business coach over the years is just always doing that reinforcement in the moments where somebody might be, falling apart. Like, can I do this? Writing a book is so hard. I don't think I can do it. And we have, or going through a shift in the market where they're panicked about getting business. And it's just, there's always a very specific kind of conversation that I have at that moment, which is just reconnecting and anchoring them with what they know about themselves, where they get strength, how they can be feeding their own energy, how they can remember hard things that they've done in the past, and just, also be connected to why is it important for them at this time to be bringing this work forward. We so often look outside, and usually there's a great value. I'm a person who's always looking for cool new ideas and frameworks and hacks. That's part of being a innovative business person. But it's different when we're always judging ourselves that however I've done it is maybe not right. And if I could just be like that person, if I could just do that. And then we often miss.
Well, we can't just be that person. It's not possible, because they're that person. We've done, right?
In many different.
Yeah.
That's right. And even, I've been reflecting a lot. I'll be 59 this year on my birthday.
When's your birthday?
August 28th.
Oh my gosh. I'll be 59 on the 23rd.
Are you kidding me? Okay. Now, little aside for the listeners, now we have to bond even more. So that is so you're my older sister by 5 days.
By 5 days.
But a fire horse, right? In the Chinese year.
Awesome. So, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, you might find the same thing, or those of a certain age, where I really think more broadly about value, success markers, certain decisions that I've made and why I've made them, in addition to conversations I have with my clients, where I think there's just such a rich way that we can understand the many different ways in which we have shared our value. Absolutely. And each one, to me, the important thing is that we are we're acting from a kind of being conscious about what we want, that we're challenging ourselves to grow. If anything, I feel more energy and enthusiasm for maybe growing my business a lot more now that, my kids are about to be out of the house. I'm not like some of my peers are like slowing down and maybe kind of wanting to do things part-time. I feel like I'm just getting warmed up.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Experience to look at. But it is interesting. I think, gosh, if I'm imagining, measuring my success, not just by books that I've written, by like books I've helped bring out into the world, or the amount of money I've helped my clients make, in some cases would be more than I would make in a given year. But that's because it fit perfectly with how much I wanted to work, what I wanted to do, and maybe how I wanted to be present with my kids. So it's just a very personal,
absolutely,
way to look at it. And at different phases of our lives, we can have a very different set of measurements and goals. And I think that's perfectly normal. Maybe you've made tons of money and you've only focused on that. And then now you're really ready to do things that are more about quality of life, or the opposite. So it's that's the interesting part to me.
Yeah. There's a great book. You've referenced one earlier. Have you read Arthur C. Brooks' book, From Strength to Strength?
I don't think so.
Oh,
no.
It's quite good. Talking about as we age and how value manifests through us, or how we create value as we age and we become wiser in our years, and perhaps less of the actionable doing as we are in our younger years. It's a beautiful journey of just exploration of how we get stronger and stronger. Anyway, maybe an interesting resource. Can I pivot just a bit? Because you said something earlier that I'm curious about. If I can, I'd like to ask a question. You talked about the hard things in the past, and those are the things that often we learn the most from, right?
Yeah.
Has there been a hard journey in your past that has had a consequential influence on who you have become that you might like to share with us?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one, probably, a number of pivotal things that all of us, if we've been on the earth long enough, have had. I know in the 2007, 2008, my ex-husband, Daryl, but who was my husband at the time, had a heavy equipment construction business. And so here in Arizona, it was a time of just great boom. Our daughter just had a brand new tiny baby daughter, my daughter, Angie, who was just born. And we had the most extensive crash I think I've ever experienced. And I lived through, when I was in Silicon Valley, the crash of the bust. And it just was so scary and painful. I said, in the metaphor I always thought about, it was like we had an ever-growing hole in the backyard that we just kept dumping barrelfuls of money into, because construction is such a heavy business. And it was terrifying. And here I had this brand new baby. And then I was writing a book about like the wisdom of leaving your corporate job to start a business. My business, thankfully, had always been consistent, but living and understanding the uncertainty and the fear when falling apart was really, really challenging. So I remember talking to my dad about it when I was having some of those existential moments writing the book. And he said, you know what, you're going to write a better book because of this experience happening. And I like to think, I always say, my promise for Escape from Cubicle Nation was that either you would get excited and you see that maybe it was easier than you thought, and you would take off if you've been desiring working for yourself, or you would realize what was involved, and you just would decide that you'd be better off trying to make your life as an employee better, stronger place. Because when you realize everything that's involved, it may not be a fit for you. And that really is, I think, the, desire that I have. So that was a huge one. Last year, I call it my year as a country song, because I went through a divorce. My sister died, my stepmom died, my dog died. I said, if I had a truck, it would have been like pulled off to my brother's house burned down. Like it was just one of these weird years in which everything happened. So that obviously was, more of a fresh experience, but it really, if anything, it brought me back to the value of my life, the kind of gratitude that I have. I know losing my sister, who is just a young 66 years old, was just a reminder, like, to not take anything for granted, to, make sure that I was really fully taken advantage of opportunity. And I know right now, like I'm just much more focused on adventure and travel and connection and doing interesting work and pushing the edge.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want to be sitting on my laurels, like waiting for anything to happen at all. So
Right.
yeah, it's like always the hard times really do lead to breakthroughs and gratitude on the other side. But I tell you, I was barely dragging myself to the end of 2024. It was the hardest year of my life, I would say.
And how, yeah, I'm hearing that. How, as you experienced that year and you're now in 2025 and looking towards 26, 27, 28 and onwards, how did that experience change your work life experience, do you think?
I'm sensitive if we have any editing possibility. I hear an air blower. Can you hear that outside
Only
my?
margin. It's very little. It's not
Okay.
distracting. You're good.
Okay.
Thank
So for
you.
you listening, my apologies. It shouldn't go on for very long. Neighbor cleaning their yard. But thinking about like planning and looking ahead, both there's something that's really wonderful about having like an open chapter. And I feel like in many ways, we talked a little bit about like the overall path that I've taken of spending lots of time abroad in, Latin America, Switzerland. I speak French, Spanish, and Portuguese. And I've used them for sure over the years.
Yeah.
But now, especially with my daughter going to college in Paris, I'm really open to be thinking about ways to be bringing my work other places. So I'm doing a lot more speaking in Latin America, looking for ways in which I can be bringing the work forward and open and extend into new markets. It's just like exciting for me and also has adventure and lets me use certain skills that I haven't used as much. And then I also think it's about like really being able to lean in with not having to do the active day-to-day caretaking, right, as a parent, and really leaning in to be building our own agency in a way that is modeling what it is that we're talking about with others. We always say, we want it's a whole journey when you're working internally in the operations to make them smooth, externally bringing your business to market. Even though I've been in business so many years, it's really a different business model. It's a whole different way of working. So it's kind of like having a startup within an established business. And so I really am interested in, making sure that I'm leaning in and practicing what I preach and doing the very best we can while also modeling that it's not about being perfect. Like if we have strong connections, if we're responsible, if we, talk through areas and have a bump or two in the road, that's a normal part of doing this work in the world.
Yeah, very interesting. It sounds, as you said, hard times in our past, they always inform who we become. And, sometimes the big thing that you pulled on here, I think, Pam, that's, I appreciate the wisdom in it, is the gratitude around it. I think sometimes we can go through hard times, and rather than seeing the gifts inside and the gratitude for what it alerts us to, what it awakens us to, we can often see that as a negative or a hindrance and become less aware of the possibilities and see it through the lens of limitation,
Yes, very much so. I'll never forget when my dad, a number of years ago, he passed away like 7 years ago, but 20 years before that, he had gone through cancer treatment and went through surgery. And we met him at the hospital right after, and they were like wheeling him out from, surgery. He was still a little bit groggy, but he just had this like look on his face, and he was just like, I'm so grateful for these doctors. I'm so grateful for this hospital. And it wasn't just the, medications that were talking for him. Like that was the nature of the way that my dad, really looked at things. And I really have been so influenced by that. And it's not to gaslight ourselves for going through really difficult situations. And I feel like I've had hard things, as everybody has, but there's many other people who have had much harder situations that have happened through time, through generations. But it's being able to look at it. I think a lot about, our choice for what it is that we're choosing to be accountable and responsible for. And there's something that's kind of cool that who knows the reason? I don't really know philosophically or spiritually, but we are on this earth at this particular time. And it always makes me feel good to think about what is a role that I could play that would be really fully realizing the fact that I happen to be placed on this earth at this time.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of things to work on right now. I know here in the US, like we're not doing too well. I just was in Canada and Vancouver this week. And it was, fun talking with my Canadian friends and knowing, we're interconnected, things can, influence us. But the thing that does keep me going is how can I be a good steward of my life? How can I be helpful? And maybe there's a very specific reason why it is that I'm here, you're here at this moment. And I think if we lean in that way and also just know that it is important to be experiencing joy and connection every day. That is part of our human experience. It is not guaranteed at all. We could be gone tomorrow. We could be gone later on today. And if that's the case, we don't want to be deferring that experience of being joyful. But I also think that joy doesn't mean that we can't also do really important hard work together.
And ideally, you're joyful doing the hard work because the work itself, even though it's hard, is also joyful, right? In the perfect world. And that's kind of what we're aiming for is, as you're saying, you've got that twinkle in the eye and you're turning it into something. And I'm thinking that the polish, there's a little sparkle in there somewhere. It needs a bit of polish so that the twinkle does surface. And let's get the twinkle in your eyes so that we can find that. That's such an exciting thing for me. I'm always looking for the twinkle. I'm always looking for it because the sparkle in the eye just tells us that someone's alert and alive and feels a joyful experience. They're experiencing the world through a happy and fulfilling lens. That's what we're looking for. So if we don't have it. Okay, so last few minutes here. As you're reflecting on this conversation, I would love for you to highlight for us what's really stood out for you as you've been reflecting on your story and your experience so far.
Yeah, I think for me, what's interesting is as we blend the personal and professional, looking at a lot of the questions that you've had about, maybe things that have informed like why I do the work or why I have the method that I have or what, brings me joy. I really think that's the essence of what it is that we're solving for as we look at our work lives. And it is not easy to run a business. And it's also super enjoyable to know that you have done it. And like it for everybody who's listening, who's in that work, some days, it really does push you to the edge. And it's really helpful to know why it's important to do it and to realize that you do have agency in being able to make certain changes. And that's the thing to me that is part of what I always just want to bring forward, with my clients is just there's many, many ways to get to a desired end. And it is exciting to challenge ourselves to get our great work and our methods into the hands of more people. It can be exciting to hit huge financial goals. Again, I get even though it's none of my business, it's my client's job to do that. I always tell them, like, when you get that big purchase order, like, give me a screenshot of that huge number that you have and text it to me because it just is exciting. Like we're sharing in the joy of that work. So, but that's not the only joy that matters. And when we're, fragmenting ourselves with just thinking about our business and then our personal lives and not seeing the interconnection, it cuts off, I think, a lot of possibility. And it means that sometimes we act in a more like stiff or less creative, innovative way if we don't realize that we really have a lot to bring to being creative about how it is that we get our work done. And I think I find my clients appreciate that. Like I love to learn about them and their quirks and their families and their dogs and their, humanity. In addition to working with them on their business.
Exactly. I've coined it when you've got someone who's a technical expert, they're still bound by the rules. And once they are an expert, they can strive for mastery, but mastery comes through being a creative master. So it's about allowing that creativity to flow through. And that's where mastery is really experienced. Otherwise, you're just stuck in expertise. So it's kind of a fun journey to go through, which 100%. You just spoke to. Beautiful. All righty. So for those who would like to find out more about you, Pam, or perhaps look at how you might help them with productizing their offer, where might people be able to find you?
PamelaSlim.com is the
Okay.
best spot. So
Okay.
that's where I have my contact information there. And then I am on LinkedIn. So that's a good place if you want to connect
Okay.
socially. You can just let me know that you came through this podcast. And I really have enjoyed through the years getting to get more comfortable with LinkedIn and just see it as a really good place to
Mm,
also be connecting, people with each other.
yeah.
So that's a good spot.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today, for sharing all your wisdom and your story. And it's been an absolute delight getting to know you.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, we'll talk soon. Bye for now.